Much like an ascent to the summit of Mount Everest, February 2017 offers the greatest possible hope for the future of UKIP. The possibility for us to win our first ever constituency seat where a popular incumbent did not defect to us. And yet at the same time, if things go wrong, we could quite possibly be faced with our demise as a political party. On the 23rd of February, the people of Stoke Central and Copeland in Cumbria will vote to replace MPs who have just resigned from Labour, a party that very few now believe has a credible future. In Stoke Central, everything lines up perfectly for us. Nearly 70% of Stoke voted for Brexit last year. UKIP came second there in 2015. The incumbent party has decided to stand a Remainer candidate, and our own candidate is the person with the highest profile in our party, our leader, Paul Nuttall. Opinion polls of voter intentions in Stoke are being conducted by all sides, and data is being selectively presented so as to advance the respective agenda of each party. Pretty much all of these polls are not actually honest attempts to determine how people plan to vote, but are being used to communicate whichever message the people responsible for running these polls wants to project. I would ask you to therefore ignore all these polls and media speculation because they are a distraction and completely unreliable, and in some cases small social media surveys are actually being reported in the national press, with few journalists actually bothering to point out that in some cases there have been fewer than 200 participants, and the respondents have all been followers of campaigns that have an overt agenda to leave the European Union. The messages being projected by each party are conceived to manipulate either their own followers into taking action or else their opponents into not taking action. Right now, it looks like the Labour leadership wants their own members to think that UKIP will win Stoke Central in order to frighten as many Labour activists and lobbying groups as possible from around the country into descending on Stoke to campaign against UKIP. While a rogue but influential faction within Labour actually wants Labour to sacrifice this seat and wants to sabotage this election and is hoping that UKIP wins, as they see this very desperate measure as the only way to convince the pro-Corbyn membership that Corbyn absolutely has to be replaced, or the Labour Party will never be electable. The Conservatives seem to want Labour to think UKIP will win Stoke Central so that Labour concentrate the majority of their national campaigning resources into Stoke, both in order to defeat UKIP but primarily to divert resources away from Copeland, which they know is the only one of the two seats that they can actually win. The Conservatives want us in UKIP to think we can win Stoke Central so that we go for broke there and direct all our resources there and don't therefore split the Conservative vote in Copeland, which would allow Labour to win there and mean that the Conservatives gained no new seats on the 23rd of February. But amongst all these confusing messages, we should never forget that the Conservatives are in the business of winning elections. Everything they say is primarily subordinate to the fact that this is what they do for a living. And the Conservatives will almost scientifically determine precisely what they need to say at any given time with respect to their primary objective of maintaining power and winning any elections that are humanly possible for them to win, and with frankly no respect either to what is actually the truth or to what are actually their intentions. The Conservatives will embrace any policy of any party if it helps them maintain their power. When UKIP came to be seen as a threat by manoeuvring the Tories into having to give us a referendum on our EU membership, the Tories began the process of adopting all the significant policies that distinguished us from them. So now the Tories want our grammar schools, they claim they want our Brexit, and yesterday they started saying that, just as we have been saying for many years, they too now no longer want to intervene in the affairs of other nations or start the kind of wars that we in UKIP have long argued are futile, immoral and counterproductive. Now, if UKIP's new identity comes to be understood by the people of Britain as being primarily that of being the enemy of Labour, we will very quickly come to be seen as being the unwitting allies of the Tories. And with Prime Minister Theresa May feigning her Brexit credentials now that she knows that this reflects the mood of the country, our being seen to be friends with the Tories will render us irrelevant and a waste of an otherwise better leveraged vote for the Tories. The fact is that UKIP absolutely has to win Stoke Central, or the party will be perceived nationally as having run its natural course, completed its mission, and having finally been made redundant by the Conservatives. So this by-election is quite literally a fight to the death for UKIP's survival. And if UKIP loses, we are in a great deal of trouble nationally, because since Stoke Central is essentially, or at the very least perceived to be, the Brexit capital of Britain, this will be an indication that our generous and unsuspecting nation will have allowed themselves to have been led along yet again by the cynical deception of the Conservatives. The same Conservatives who campaigned on a platform of fiscal conservatism and responsibility and yet subsequently ran a cumulative deficit of £630 billion in their last term, and the same Conservatives that promised a net migration rate of under 100,000 a year at the very same time that net migration actually ran to more than triple this number and our highest rate ever. Well, Stoke should, without doubt, be our primary campaigning objective. Nonetheless, if by our deliberate neglect of Copeland, we are seen to be facilitating the Conservatives in winning this symbolically significant seat from Labour, when just 2 years ago the Tories lost there by a 7% margin, UKIP will convincingly be defining its new identity in the nation's eyes as the Conservatives' stupid floozy, someone to be given a little incentive in the short term, but ultimately someone to be used, discarded and humiliated. To retain any credibility and relevance in the eyes of the nation, we therefore have to do two things in February. We have to win Stoke Central, and we have to increase our 15.5% vote share in Copeland by at least half as much as we expect Labour to lose of its share of the vote from 2 years ago. I cannot reiterate forcibly enough the enormous significance of these by-elections. If we are going to win in Stoke, we urgently need canvassers and leafleters, volunteers who really want to work hard and get things done and who are motivated by getting real results. A strong showing in Stoke could make all the difference in terms of whether or not we survive as a party. I therefore urge all members of UKIP who live south of Lancaster, as a matter of urgency, to please use the link on the homepage of my website to register their willingness to join me in doing their utmost to help Paul Nuttall win this crucial by-election. And if you live north of Lancaster, I would implore you to please do whatever you need to do to consecrate as much time as possible to come and help out in the constituency of Copeland. In Copeland, we have a truly wonderful candidate in Fiona Mills, a lady I know personally and who is a thoroughly honourable person and clearly committed to service. A strong result for Fiona will give massive hope and inspiration to all those in Copeland who long for the people of Britain to truly take back control of our affairs. But critically, a defeat in Copeland for the Conservatives and a double defeat nationally will challenge their arrogance and will ensure that we keep them cautious and will convince them that we will not all be led along by their cynical ruse, and that the people of Britain can see through their chameleon-like deception. Such a result would be a hugely significant safeguard against the otherwise greater likelihood of a deliberately fudged Brexit that will play into the hands of vested interests in a move clearly calculated by the Tories to be enacted during the unnecessarily protracted and convoluted negotiations that we can undoubtedly expect from Theresa May's government once Article 50 is invoked. I've not forgotten that only very recently we had a leadership contest in UKIP, and not every member of the party sided with Paul back then. And during the very healthy process of scrutinising each other's platforms, things were said and done that may still be causing some lingering concerns. But I would ask you to please reflect on the fact that it is impossible that any leader should ever appeal to all of those that he or she leads, and that notwithstanding the handful of ways that the election process was slightly compromised, Paul received an absolutely unquestionable mandate, and that he is doing his very best to fight for what he believes in, for objectives that every one of us members in UKIP share with him. You know, one of the saddest things that I see in life, and I see this regularly, and it breaks my heart, is when those who ought to be the closest and most united and most supportive of each other instead end up breaking up into arbitrary, ineffectual little factions and working against the very people who most properly deserve their loyalty. This happens in marriages, it happens in families, it's happened in the past in UKIP, and it even happened with a Brexit campaign and almost cost us our national sovereignty. There is a proper time to challenge leadership and to pose hard questions to one another, but there is a time to unite. And right now, with our very existence as a party threatened by a common enemy, this is absolutely the time to unite and to fight together for our very survival. So if you didn't happen to side with Paul Nuttall a couple of months ago, I would now ask you to please put behind you any reservations you may have about how you perceive the present leadership and the future of UKIP, because whatever your concerns and however logical and justified your inhibitions, one thing is absolutely certain. There is nothing of greater value to the people of Britain than our national sovereignty and our democratic ability to control our own destiny. And on the basis of the present composition of political parties in Britain, something that is absolutely assured is that if the primary force behind Brexit is seen to be weak and is not perceived by the Conservatives to be a threat, this scenario will greatly increase the likelihood that we will never actually end up with a genuine Brexit. So please think very soberly about the future of Britain, think about our children's futures, and I truly hope to see you very soon in Stoke and Copeland. Thank you.